So now I'd like to introduce Rachel Aldred, who is a reader in transport at the University of Westminster. She is very, very interesting on her insights into cycling, and I think you will really enjoy what you learn from her. So I'm going to pass you over.
Thank you very much, Edward, and I'm very impressed to see so many people here, particularly on a Friday evening. It's clear how much interest there is in this issue, and I have to say I think many of you here know a lot more than I do about the city deal, so I'm not going to speak about the kind of detailed specifics, but I'm going to follow on from the talk about the ambition, and talk about ambition in terms of cycling and what can be achieved in terms of cycling here. Obviously, cycling in Cambridge is the highest it is in the country, but I think there's still potential for substantial growth as part of modal shift towards a range of sustainable modes. So I'd say something about cycling potential in Cambridgeshire, and then how we go about achieving that cycling potential, and in particular ensuring wider participation, ensuring that all of our community can benefit from cycling. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about some results from a project that I've been involved in, a very exciting project led here at CEDA at the University of Cambridge and funded by the Department for Transport. It's called the Propensity to Cycle tool, and essentially what we're doing is looking at cycling potential across the country under a range of scenarios. And it's quite interesting to look at Cambridgeshire because, as you know, Cambridgeshire has very high cycling already in a UK context. So this is just a map from the Propensity to Cycle tool, and Cambridgeshire, cycling within the whole of the Cambridgeshire area in terms of the Shire, is currently at 9.2% of all journeys to work. So in the UK context, that's very high, but there's still potential for substantial increases. So I'm just going to give a few examples of how high cycling could potentially be based on the kind of trips that people make here. Now, at the moment, I'm only talking about commuter cycling, so it's only a small proportion of journeys, but it's indicative of the fact that there are still a lot of short car trips and so on that can be switched to cycling. The results I'm just going to show you are based on scenarios imagining that people here cycled at the same rates as the Dutch for trips of the same length and hilliness. So it's ambitious, but it's based on what the Dutch actually do. So given supportive infrastructure, given supportive policy, it should be possible. There's an additional scenario called e-bikes that basically takes those Dutch cycling propensities and adds in the assumption that people might use e-bikes for longer and hillier trips. Now this is something, e-bikes are not very common in this country at the moment, but 1 million are sold every year in Germany and in the Netherlands. It is the future. It is the way in which people will be able to cycle trips that currently people feel are a little too long, a little too hilly. But we will see, as cycling increases, we will see more and more use of e-bikes for many of these trips. So these, I'm afraid you probably can't see that terribly well, but I'll tell you what it says. So on the left, we have a map of what cycling would look like across England if people cycled to work at the same rate as the Dutch for trips of particular lengths and hilliness. And for Cambridgeshire, for the county of Cambridgeshire, the rate will be 23.7%, up from 9.7% currently. So there are a lot of trips that could be made by bike that currently aren't, even in Cambridgeshire. If we add in e-bike potential for longer and hillier trips, we go up to 28.6%. So there are still a lot of trips that could be cycled. And this gives you a bit of a more detailed picture of the county. So on the left, we can see cycling to work rates across the Cambridgeshire county area. And you can see Cambridge itself is obviously very high cycling to work. That's, we're talking like 25, 30, 35%. But this is the potential under this ambitious scenario. And you can see a lot of those areas around Cambridge. You know, currently cycling to work is at 3, 4, 5%. But if we could improve cycling conditions, potentially it could be maybe 15, 20, 25%. That's a lot of cars that are currently coming in, trying to come into the city that would not need to be coming into the city potentially. This gives you an example from one middle-level super output area. This is in South Cambridgeshire, which currently has 15% of people cycling to work in that area of South Cambridgeshire, which sounds like that's not bad, but it could be 32% based on our scenario if we had people cycling for these shorter trips at the same rates as the Dutch do. We could have a lot more cycling. This is another example. This is an East Cambridgeshire area where currently people only cycle trips to work at the rate of 5%, so only 1 in 20 trips to work is cycled. That could be 21% based on our scenario. So I just wanted to quickly show you a few desire lines, so trips between origins and destinations, and what the potential is there. So this is between out in Fulbourn and Cambridge city centre, and at the moment 22% of trips between those origins and destinations to work are cycled. Now that could be 46% in our scenario if we saw greater uptake of cycling along the lines of Dutch rates for trips of that length. This is another one. This is coming up from Bar Hill into the city centre, and currently only 4% of those trips to work are cycled. And under our scenario, that becomes 25%. And all these changes involve a substantial decline in the number of people driving. So this means fewer cars on the road. Just one more example. This is over in the Fenland area, and this is an area where currently 0% of those trips are cycled, but could be 31% based on the distance, based on the hilliness. You know, this is only a journey of 5 miles, and no one is currently cycling it. So what do we need to do to build for that potential? Well, I think on the left we can see what not to do, and luckily we have seen a shift away from this approach. The left is our National Cycle Infrastructure Design Guide, but really, unfortunately, it's an image of how not to build for mass cycling. That kind of cycling environment is not attractive. No one really wants to cycle there. Even that guide probably doesn't really want to cycle there if he had a chance. And on the right, you can see the kind of cycling environments that people are telling us they want. Cycling environments that are well separated from motor traffic, that are pleasant, enjoyable and comfortable. It isn't rocket science. I just wanted to point out that people's unwillingness to cycle with motor traffic is not purely a sort of distaste or dislike. It's also based on real experience. So I conducted research into cycling near misses. I looked at the rates at which people experienced incidents that didn't involve injuries, but that were nevertheless something that was frightening, something that was annoying for them. And this table from a paper that I published with my colleague Sean Crossweller basically gives you a sense of just how frequent some of those unpleasant incidents are. So if you cycle to work regularly in the UK, you might be killed cycling once every 8,000 years, which hopefully is quite comforting because probably none of us is going to live to 8,000. Even a reported serious injury once every 400 years, a reported slight injury once every 67 years, and any injury, reported or not, probably a slight injury, once every 20 years. However, I found, based on my near-miss research, that people experienced, for instance, very scary incidents around a weekly basis. So people who are currently cycling are being frightened on a weekly basis. And this isn't the kind of thing that will encourage more people to cycle. There's now a pretty broad academic consensus, as I was saying, that most people want to cycle away from motor traffic or in environments with low levels of motor traffic. And increasingly there's also evidence that if we listen to non-cyclists, Edward was talking about listening to people who don't use buses, listening to people who don't cycle about why they don't cycle. If we build that kind of stuff, increasingly there's evidence that they do come. The London cycle superhighways have shown an immediate uplift of around 60%. And there's high quality studies in Cambridge here of the impact of the guided busway, the cycleway attached to that, the increase in active commuting of people walking and cycling to work. So the kind of gold standard infrastructure we need is routes completely away from motor traffic, protected tracks on busier roads, and very quiet, smaller streets that don't have much in the way of motor traffic. And this looks different in different contexts. On the left there you've got the Cambridge busway cycleway, very high quality infrastructure, very pleasant to cycle along. Down there we've got the London Cycle Superhighway coming up towards Big Ben. I encourage all of you who haven't tried it to go and try it. It's really fantastic, expensive, high quality infrastructure. But on the right you've got a couple of examples of less expensive, lower profile stuff, but stuff that is also really good in terms of the cycling experience. So on the right there you've got segregation by car parking, and below you've got a simple bollard in a residential area that just makes that environment much more pleasant. Widening participation, just to finish off really and say something about this, because we need to ensure that all our communities can cycle. Cambridgeshire is doing well at this. In a UK context, Cambridgeshire is succeeding in encouraging cycling among a diversity of its population, but we need to ensure this continues as cycling grows. And some research that I did suggested that in places where cycling had increased recently, like London, it hadn't really got substantially more diverse in terms of age and gender, at least not between 2001 and 2011. The chart on the right just is quite interesting because it shows you how Cambridge resident commuters with a disability travel to work, and around a quarter of them cycle to work as their main mode. And that's really interesting because often in the UK we assume that disabled people don't cycle. Just today I experienced a cycle diversion that had steps. Many people who can't walk but can cycle would not have been able to follow that diversion. It was just completely inaccessible. So Cambridge tells us that it's possible to get a diversity of people cycling, and in fact it's essential if we want to realise its potential. A couple of things are really important for wider participation. So firstly, direct routes. This is something that we often forget, and some of the research we conducted as part of the Propensity to Cycle tool showed us how important direct routes are for women and for older people, and for disabled people and children as well. So just on the left you can see, if a quieter route creates a detour such that a 2-mile trip becomes a 3-mile trip, younger men become 11% less likely to cycle that route. But for younger women, the decline is 19%. So women are nearly twice as likely to decide not to cycle that route if it's longer. For older adults, it declines by 35%. So if we build routes that take cyclists the long way round, we're designing out cycling by older and disabled people, by women. Also, subjectively safe routes, comfortable, pleasant routes to cycle along, also widen participation. This graph is just from a systematic review that I led, looking at gender and preferences for infrastructure away from motor traffic. And the chart shows the findings of the study by sample size. So 3,500 is the highest sample size. The bigger studies are towards that end. And all the red bars are studies that found that women's preferences for separated cycle infrastructure was stronger than men's. So you can see all those big studies are finding a difference. So men and women both want to cycle in environments that are comfortable, pleasant, away from motor traffic, but for women it's particularly important. And increasingly as well, evidence has shown that where you build those higher quality routes, you get a higher proportion of women cycling. So this is evidence from London, where unfortunately we don't have the gender equity in cycling that you have in Cambridgeshire. But this is from a study looking at who was using protected cycle lanes compared to comparable routes where there was no cycling provision. And on the unprotected routes, it was 75% men among the cyclists that were counted. On the routes with protected lanes, it was only 66% men and 34% women. So you could see a difference. You could see that it did make a difference in terms of women being able to cycle. There was also a difference in terms of older people as well. So just to finish then, I mean, the key points, there's lots of potential still to increase cycling in Cambridgeshire, even within the city centre, but particularly some of those areas just outside. And the Propensity to Cycle tool and other analysis, looking also at where the new homes, the new jobs are going to be, looking at the kind of non-commute trips that people want to make, which are also really important, can help identify the key areas, the key routes that you want to prioritise for this high-quality infrastructure. The diversity of cyclists here is currently relatively good in terms of age, gender, ability and so on, and it's really important to maintain that, to plan that that is maintained. And the key is direct routes and subjectively safe really high quality routes. And then I think Cambridge can move from being, really impressive within a UK context to being a world leader in terms of cycling and cycling participation. And that will really be a major contributor, I think, to having this ambitious new sustainable transport system for 2031. Thank you.